Hey, how you doing? I hope you're well. I'm Deanna and welcome to my channel. I cannot believe that it is already July, so that means today I will be sharing with you all the books that I read in the month of June, which is quite a lot because I took part in 2 readathons. But before we get into the books, let's jump in to the Bookish Stats. So as I mentioned, I did read quite a lot. I've managed to finish 15 books in the month of June, which while it isn't my biggest number of books read in the month, it is one of my biggest pages read. So those 15 books comprised of 6,320 pages, mostly because I was reading a lot of fantasy romance due to one of my reading challenges, but more on that later. My average rating of the month was 4.2 stars, which is still pretty good. For a breakdown, we had 2 5 stars, 7 4.5 stars, 4 4 stars, 1 3.5 stars, and 1 3 stars. So in terms of my personal rating system, 3 is considered an enjoyable read, something that I had fun with, and so overall having a 3-star read being my lowest read, I would count that as being a pretty excellent reading month. In terms of my genre, as you can see, we did not deviate much from 2 genres in one genre in particular because of that reading challenge that I'm partaking in. So we had 80% of the books I read were fantasy romance, which was 12 of the books I read, and then 3 books were romance. For formats, we do have a little bit more of a variation. My most popular format was audio with 8 books. Next was ebook, when I read 4 ebooks, and I had 2 arcs, which was great. Am I behind in getting the reviews out? Yes. I am expecting those to be out very shortly, so keep an eye on my blog and Instagram for the full thoughts and less rambly thoughts on those 2 review copies. And then I read 1 physical book, which was hardback. Coming into my last stat, which I like to keep track of, which is my series versus standalone. I don't think I have seen such a discrepancy in the stats in a very long time. So I started 11 new series in June. I did manage to read 3 sequels and I read 1 standalone. So definitely going to have to do a reading sequels months coming up at the end of the year just to make a dent in the number of series that I've started. So as I mentioned, I took part in 2 readathons this month. The first being the Amazing Readathon. I was part of Team Romance, to no one's surprise, which I think we came in second, which was, still pretty good. And I did manage to finish all 10 of the city prompts and then managed to squeeze in 5 sightseeing prompts as well. So yeah, that was pretty fun. I did enjoy the fact that with this readathon, you didn't get all your prompts up front. So trying to squeeze in books that fit this readathon along with my Summer of Romantasy reading challenge was a challenge, but one that I enjoyed. It kept me on my toes the entire month because I was looking forward to the prompt drop for the next leg of the tour. Okay, speaking of the Summer of Romantasyathon challenge, this is something that's taking place over June and July, so we are halfway through. Unfortunately, we are not halfway through the prompts, so I do have a lot of catching up to do in July, but I will show you these are the prompts that I have managed to finish. Of the 35 prompts, I've managed to tick off 12 of them, which still a pretty big effort considering that 3 of the books that I read in June were romances and not fantasy romances. I'm hoping to dedicate all of July to just fantasy romance, hoping to tick off the majority of these prompts, and I've decided to bring my TBR wine glass back to help me pick the books that I'm reading, just to bring some spice into July. So yes, keep an eye on my TikTok and Instagram if you're interested to see what books I'm reading and what the jar picks. Otherwise, we'll come back here next month to wrap up July and you'll see how far along I got in this challenge. Didn't mean to get too much into the July portion of my reading, but hey, it is what it is. Now let's get on to the books. So the first book I read in June was one of my review copies that I was kindly sent by the author, Morgan Elizabeth and Valentine PR. So thank you so much for sending a copy my way. And that was All My Love. And this is a second chance rockstar romance, which tick tick, love those tropes. And in this we are following the second chance romance between Stella and Riggins. Riggins is the lead singer of a very big rock band, and Stella was his childhood sweetheart and co-songwriter, and it is their second chance romance. He comes back to town. He at this point has thought he's completely lost his chance with Stella, but finds out that they are married because they got married on a drunken night, and he was deep in the throes of a alcohol addiction and has no memory of them being married, which really was the straw that broke the camel's back in Stella's mind and what brought her back to her hometown, kind of defeated. Her mother had hated the fact that she was with Riggins in the first place and had this fairy tale idea that they were going to go run off into the sunset and make a career out of music. So her mother was right there to tell her, I told you so. And this was very angsty. I wish it was a little bit more angsty. You know, I really wanted it to break me and leave me sobbing, like, you know, Drive by Kate Stewart or the All of Me duet by Siobhan Davis, but maybe I wasn't in a crying mood. Anyway, the way Morgan Elizabeth handles some very hard topics, as I mentioned, alcohol addiction in general. We also have Stella's mum, who is quite manipulative and emotionally abusive and controlling, and Stella herself is dealing with depression. And the way she is able to deal with those topics is quite beautifully handled, and they feel really authentic, so I really appreciated that. And this is very much a slow burn. Stella has been hurt by Riggins, hurt by the fact that he was lying to her and hiding his addiction and refused to get help, and she just got to a point where she couldn't continue with the relationship without it hurting herself and her own mental health. And Riggins has, you know, he's cleaned up, he's sober now, and he's really got to just stick it out and prove to Stella that he has changed and he is here and he does care for her and he's here for the long run. And he can only do that by just showing up and continuing to show up and proving that. So it is a beautiful slow burn. Apparently there is like a Sweet Home Alabama vibe to it. I haven't watched that movie in ages, so I can't confirm or deny. But yeah, I love the way he helps bring a spark back to Stella's life. Her mother has really like fed her depression and made her feel really defeatist and give up on music and her dreams. So I love the way that he is able to kind of bring that spark back to her, help her stand up to her mother and help her heal. Overall, I did tear up a few times. There was some angst, really slow burn, but the payoff of them getting together was pretty sweet. I will say that despite the fact that he's a rock star and she's a songwriter, wasn't a lot of music, which I do tend to like in my rockstar romance, but is in between albums, really struggling to write without her, and she doesn't write as much as she wants just because it feeds into her memories of Riggins. So kind of understand why music wasn't super at the forefront, but you know me, if it's a rockstar romance, I really want more music, more touring, more recording, more writing. I really want that at the forefront. So I think, yeah, I miss that a little bit with this one. Next up, we have A River of Golden Bones by A.K. Mulford, which is the first book in a new series of hers called the Golden Court series. And I really loved that werewolves seem to be making their fantasy romance debut. In this, we are following twins, Carla and Briar, who are the last of the Golden Wolves. Their family and their city was decimated by an evil sorceress, and they have been living in hiding. At this point, no one knows that Carla exists, and Briar has been married off to the prince of a neighboring kingdom in hopes of building an alliance. And there's been a promise of, you know, saving their town. To make matters complicated, the prince in question that Briar is engaged to is Calla's best friend and crush. And I really enjoyed this. This was a fun time. We had a lot of political intrigue. Who the sorceress was revealed to be, wasn't expecting that. And there is like a Sleeping Beauty spin to this story. So at one stage, Briar is sent into an eternal slumber and the evil sorceress takes her fated mate, and Carla breaks away from Prince Grey and the king to go save her sister. And yeah, it was wonderful. I really enjoyed that she ends up hiding with a troupe of traveling musicians, with these humans. there is this beautiful representation of both ethnicity and queerness, which I really enjoyed while living with the troupe. The kind of leader of the musicians is a trans woman, and Carla discovers and really kind of learns to identify that she herself is a non-binary person. And I loved the romance. It is a friends to lovers romance, which I like seeing in a fantasy romance because a lot of the time we do get the traditional kind of enemies to lovers, so it was a nice change. And I was a little worried that Prince Grey was going to bow down to his father, but when he risks everything to go after her, it just melted my heart. Very excited to see what happens in the next book. I would recommend this if you're looking for a fantasy romance with fantastic queer representation, a friends to lovers romance, and has werewolves. Then I picked up Slaying the Shadow Prince by Helen Schuer. This is one of the books in the Mortal Enemies to Monster Lovers series, which was a series of standalones by a number of popular fantasy romance authors, and this one is set in her Legends of Thesma series, Blood and Steel being the first book. And this was, again, another fun time. In this, we're following a girl named Drew whose family and city has been destroyed by the Wraiths. They had asked for help from the legendary warriors of Thesma, but were refused assistance. So in this world, women are not typically meant to be warriors and not meant to fight and, you know, train and all that jazz. However, since their city has been attacked and there's not that many people left, Drew throws herself into training and to becoming a ranger to help protect the city from the wraiths that are still floating around nearby. And her dad is a blacksmith, and he is one of the people who forges the blades that these skilled warriors use. And in this, we have Talamir Starling, who is one of the famed warriors, and he and his apprentice are coming up to investigate what is a power drain on the weapons that they're currently using against the wraiths. And they are expecting to find a man named Drew. However, are very surprised when it is, you know, a lady. And Drew has also managed to forge metal and have it act as like a beacon to let people know if there's a wraith nearby, which is going well until we figure out that the bracelet is going off in the presence of Talamir. And the banter in here is fantastic. They are pretty much a rivals to lovers situation. They have to band together to find the nest of wraiths in hoping that killing the, almost like a vampire, like if you kill the head wraith, those who've been turned or infected will be saved. And high steam because it's like a fast burn. Like they jump into bed together quite quickly because, you know, don't know if they're going to see another day after they attack the nest of wraiths, but the relationship slowly follows. And yeah, I had a fun time with this. Would be interested to dive into her other series because I think Wilder is one of the characters, or maybe the love interest in the other series. And I think you're supposed to read this one definitely before book 4. So I'm wondering if what plays out in the end of this is going to have an impact on the other series. But this was my first foray into Helen Schuer's writing, and I really enjoyed it. Then moving on to my 2 5-star reads of this month, I picked up Peaches and Honey and Pits and Poison by R. Rader. And this is book 1 and 2 in, I think it's These Immortal Truths duology. So in this we are following a woman named Anna who is living in the 12th century. She has been excommunicated from her village because of her skin condition called vitiligo. However, they don't know what it is and assume that she has leprosy and have run her out of the town. She living in the woods by herself, just trying to survive, and one day manages to save a beautiful woman and help her escape from these guards that are chasing her. And the woman is completely in awe of Anna's kindness, that this woman who has nothing would basically give the clothes off her back to save someone else, and as a reward gifts Anna a peach, which has the gift to grant immortality. And this beautiful woman, in fact, is a shape-shifting god who is the inspiration for many trickster gods throughout mythology, including, you know, the Norse Loki, Greeks, Eris, and it is their very slow burn, beautifully epic romance which takes place over 800 years. And I is completely besotted at seeing Anna figure out who she is, learn to love herself despite the fear she has from people with her skin condition, and never lose her humanity. We see her in the backdrops of plagues, you know, the Black Death, in famine, in all the wars. I think we had, you know, Joan of Arc burning at the stake, we had the Spanish Armada, we had the Civil War, the American Revolution, World War One, and throughout this all she is been gifted and trained up as a healer, and she is just constantly trying to help people and help humanity. And then we have Kieran, who is this rather dramatic, very flashy, shape-shifting god who is trying to use his gift and his silver tongue to turn the tides and make changes by changing people's opinions. And I love their romance. He definitely looks after her and will show up whenever she's in need, but he isn't above stepping back and letting her figure out things on her own. And this pair truly, I believe, are totally endgame. Like, you know how sometimes you finish a book and you're like, they're not going to be together in 5 years' time. No, these, I mean, it takes them 800 years, it takes them about 800 years to get together. They don't get together until the 1920s in, you know, Prohibition New York. But I am completely captivated by Anna and Kieran's story. I was crying, especially with the whole scene with Pierre and Jiro. If you know, you know. And they just had me giggling, and just loved that history is the backdrop of getting to know them. And the gods, you know, you can see that these characters are like inspirations and been pulled from different mythologies to kind of create this archetype. It was just fascinating and I completely love it. More people do need to read this. It is a fully completed duology, and if you love beautiful writing, slow burn, epic romances, historical fantasy, I think you should pick up Peaches and Honey and Pit and Poisons. Also, in terms of like being super dramatic, Kieran does give me like Hal vibes, so that might be another reason to convince you to pick up this duology. Then I finally picked up Fourth Wing by Becky Yaros. I'm convinced at this stage that I'm possibly one of the last people on the face of the earth to pick up this book, and I get the hype. I am fully sold on this Hunger Games Dragon Riding Academy and was completely obsessed. So in this book we have Violet Sorrengail, who has spent most of her life convinced that she's going to follow in her father's footsteps and become a scribe, mostly because she has a undisclosed chronic illness. However, her father has passed and her mother is a general in the army and has pretty much said that no child of hers will not become a dragon rider. Will not become a dragon rider? So she sends her to the dragon riding school. And basically, as it says here, graduate or die. There are many trials. The only rule there seems to be is stay alive. If you kill each other, we don't really care. There are actually more students compared to dragons. So if you kind of start bumping each other off along the way, they don't really mind too much. So Violet has a tough time ahead of her, just keeping her head down and trying to learn everything she can and train to keep her body up to the ability to see if she can win a dragon. And yeah, lots of fun. The ending of this book is wild, and we're starting to realize that maybe what we think we know about, is it called the Empyrean Empire, isn't actually all that true. And the rebels that we're, you know, that Xaden's, we'll get to Xaden in a second, that Xaden's family have been cursed for, maybe they aren't necessarily on the wrong side of morally wrong. They're just on the wrong side of, you know, who's in charge. And very excited to see what's going to happen next. I also love that at the start of each chapter, we kind of get a transcript, or, you know, sections of the Dragon Riders Codex. We get like quotes from scribes that just give like a little bit of history, like Guide to the Riders Quadrant, things like that, which just add a little bit of context. As we said, we'll get to Xaden. Xaden is kind of a fantastic book boyfriend, and I get the hype. I see why everyone loves him. He hates Violet on sight purely because of her mum and the fact that her mum killed his dad, so obviously they're not going to get along. But throughout the journey, he never belittles Violet, unlike her childhood best friend Dane, who constantly belittles her, undermines her, and does what he can to sabotage her or get her out, where Xaden, on the other hand, very much firmly believes in her ability and will do what he can to not sugarcoat things and make her stronger. So I really enjoyed that. The steam in here was excellent. We had dragons that talk to you very much like Aragon. I'm excited and nervous to continue. I've heard not great things about Iron Flame, but after the ending of this one, I really need to know what's going on with the political landscape. So probably not the first person to recommend this, but if you're in the mood for a fun fantasy romance with steam, with dragons, with some political intrigue and a magical academy, Fourth Wing is the book for you. Changing pace, I picked up another very hyped book, Pucking Around by Emily Rath. This is a Why Choose Hockey romance, and I completely adored this. I literally have no idea why I put this off for so long. I think it was like a rainy day book, because I knew I was going to love it so much. So in this we are following Rachel Price, who is the daughter of a rock star turned physical therapist. She is a doctor, but physical therapy, and she wins this fellowship to go into sports medicine. She's a runner-up. Unfortunately, she wasn't in the first round, so she didn't necessarily get to pick her sport or choose which team she went with, but the person who won ahead of her had an accident and had to pull out. So she ends up in Florida being a physical therapist for the NHL's newest team, the Jacksonville Rays. And yeah, it is wonderful. In this one as well, we also have the prequel novella, which is where we meet Jake, who is the biggest golden retriever hero and the absolute sweetest. I'm obsessed with him. I love that he would constantly text Rachel even though she was like not interested. So they do have a one night stand in Seattle where they decide to not exchange names or anything, and it's just this very like instant connection, lust, and a night of passion. And surprise, surprise, she ends up being the physical therapist and he's a defenseman. And then we have Caleb, who is Jake's best friend and is the equipment manager. He unfortunately sustained a injury in his first game, I'm pretty sure, in NHL, and has been unable to play ever since. And then we have our Danish goalie Mars, and he is hiding an injury because he's the best goalie in the NHL, but also he is trying to make it the Danish Olympic team. So Rachel really has to push him to treat him and realize that resting for a couple of games is going to be better in the long run. So I love this. Their dynamic is amazing. The way that they really push each other to sit down and communicate and make sure everyone's getting what they need out of the dynamic is great. The dynamic is quite fluid. Like halfway through this, we do have sword crossing. So Jake and Caleb explore these like feelings they've had for each other for years and years. We have Mars there's no romantic relationship between them, but we have him kind of integrate into the club more because he's quite reserved and cut off. And yeah, I love this. The grand gesture in here is just so good. It makes me swoon. Completely flew through this. Some people might say, 700 pages is long for a hockey romance, but given the fact that we have 4 people involved, I think it is the perfect length to be able to explore their relationships, their dynamics. The steam is fantastic. We have a lot of hockey in here. Obviously, every person is involved with the Jacksonville Rays. The found family and like the team dynamic was really cool as well. And we've already got the feeling that the second book is going to be Rachel's friend Tess and I was going to say the quarterback, but wrong sport. You can tell I don't sport. This like young up and coming trainee, and I feel like they are going to have a really good dynamic. So I'm excited to continue on with the series. I'm very excited. I can see why everyone loves this. I think I'm going to have to pick this up when I'm in the mood to be with these characters again. Then I finally picked up a sequel. And I read Crimson Skies by Jamin Eve, and this is the second book in the Fallen Gods series and finishes up Morgan's story. So I won't say too much about this, but this is a portal fantasy where we're following Morgan, who is a librarian. She thought she was living her best life, working in this specialist library with her best friend. The biggest problem that, she had was figuring out where they were going to go for dinner on Friday after work and what cocktails she would consume. However, things start to go awry when she gets a call in the middle of the night from Dagger, who runs the Dangerfield Library, to find out that one of the books in their special collection has gone missing. She ends up racing back to the library in the middle of the night, even though it's against the rules, and ends up being dragged into this fantasy realm. And yeah, I Really enjoyed this one. This one really focuses on Zahar and Morgan's relationship, and it's interesting. I thought this was going to be why I choose, it isn't, and actually I'm kind of grateful that it isn't why I choose, just given I'm not sure how Jamin would convince me that Dagger and Morgan could be together given the way he treated her. That does mean that because there's 5 brothers, hopefully we do get books from all of them as well. We figure out what happened at the end and the big bads coming through, and Zahar ends up being like the perfect mate and is just so attentive. Their connection is explosive. He's an absolute sweetheart. He adores her. Gruff, if you're loving like a good gruff hero. And yeah, I really had a fun time with this, and I think it was a really great way to wrap up Morgan's story. But excited and have my fingers and toes crossed that we get more from this series. I did read books 1 and 2 of the Kingdom of Lies series by Stasia Stark, so that includes A Court This Cruel and Lovely and A Kingdom This Cursed and Empty. This was such a fun fantasy romance. In this world, humans give up their magic as a newborn to help protect them from the evil Fae. And any human who is found to have not given up their magic is considered corrupted and will be burnt at the stake. Here we have Priscilla, who is living in fear. She has a magical ability and the ability to stop time, which is super cool, and she's doing everything she can to keep that hidden. Unfortunately, Prisca saves someone and in turn has her magic revealed and is now on the run. She is trying to hide and ends up running into a band of mercenaries who save her, and they strike a deal that if she can help them get into the city, they will help keep her alive and also teach her how to use her magic. And the leader of the mercenaries is a gruff man named Lorien. So Prisca agrees to this deal, and I love the kind of road trip vibe we have of this like band of mercenaries. She gets to know them, they get to know her. There's some training montages, so if you like that, I think you'll love this. And then halfway through the first book, they end up in the capital city. They split ways, and she expects that she's going to be jumping on a boat and fleeing the country, however finds out that her best friend has been taken and is now captured and is in prison at the castle. So she is going to break in and do a prison break, and it is just so much fun. There are so many reveals that happen in this. Prisca does learn to embrace her magic, embrace her strength, and do what she can to protect people she loves and those who rely on her. And in the second book, I just loved exploring her dynamic with Lorien. We had a bit of a will they, won't they do jump into bed together, and then some secrets are revealed, and then there's some betrayed feelings and they're not really together again. And then in the second book we get to explore that dynamic, and I really enjoy watching Prisca grow and become a leader. And I can't really say much more, but I want to say more, so if you've read the book, please message me and talk to me about it, because I am completely obsessed with Lorien and Prisca. I think they're wonderful together. I have so many questions about where this series is going. In a way, the second book just ended, which is weird that I've had at least one other book this year that's ended that way. So I'm loving this series. There's 2 more books in the series, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to binge them very shortly. But yes, if you're looking for a fun fantasy romance with political intrigue, with your fae, warring courts, warring kingdoms, this is an excellent place to go. And next up, I picked up The Last Lost Girl by Casey L. Bond. Was not expecting this to be a duology, and actually I have so many questions. The way that ended, I have so many questions, and I really hope our girl Ava is going to be okay. So this is, as you can expect from the title, a dark Peter Pan reimagining. We are following Ava, who is really just trying to survive and keep her and her sister alive. Her sister Belle is unfortunately increasingly going mad, raving about pirates and shadows and second stars in the night, and telling Ava that she needs to go home to a place called Neverland. One night, Belle has a particularly bad episode and ends up being taken over by shadows and heading to Neverland and taking Ava with her. When Ava gets there, she realizes very quickly that Neverland isn't the J.M. Barrie story, and Peter has grown up and in fact is quite dark and twisted and is using the Lost Boys to his advantage and owns the island. Thankfully for Ava, she manages to escape the Lost Boys who are hunting her by running into the arms of a dashing pirate with a silver hook for a hand, who promises to help protect her and help get her sister Belle back. And I had such a fun time with this retelling. I loved all the nods and the beats and the references that Casey made to Peter Pan, which is one of my favorite fairy tales. And there is this amnesia trope in here, which was super interesting. Normally not a big fan, but in Neverland, if you don't have your shadow, you start to lose your memories. And there are chapters in here which are from Book's perspective because it's from his journal. So he's writing everything down as a way to try and remember everything that's happened. Who Belle is, that was chef's kiss. That was incredible. And yeah, the way this ended, jaw dropped. And because of the amnesia trope, we get this feeling that Ava doesn't know what's going on and what she stumbled into, but you are seeing all the red flags. And there's no release date yet for book 2, so I'm a bit sad about it, but very excited. If you're looking for, you know, a retelling, you're looking for some pirate vibes, something a bit dark in your retelling, definitely pick up The Last Lost Girl by Casey L. Bond. Then for a bit of a change of pace, I picked up Fatkini by Monica Ross. This was one of the Kindle books that I picked up probably from one of the Stuff Your Kindle days, but I was feeling a little bit like crap. I'd seen this over Instagram. There was mention of a plus size heroine, some chronic illness rep, and it was a why choose. So I said, yes, please. I need that in my life. So in this we are following Zelda, who is a audiobook narrator, and at the start of this book going through a rough time. We see very quickly she's in a relationship with a man named Tristan, who very clearly doesn't seem to give two shits about her. He's not putting any effort into their relationship. He makes some nasty comments about her weight and the way she looks, including calling her a childhood nickname that was used to harass her all through like primary school or elementary school, middle school, as it's said in the States. And at the start of the book, she finally hits her limit. They had planned to go to a vacation in Mexico. She bought herself this sexy bikini and he called it a fatkini, and she basically realizes that he has no desire to put any effort into their relationship and seems to be ashamed with her, so she kicks his ass to the curb. And from there, we get a very fast relationship with Drew, who is a paranormal, spicy fantasy romance author who is one of her biggest clients and who's had the biggest crush on her for the longest time. So he flies into town and he's there on business anyway. He's got a book tour, but helps, you know, spark her self-confidence and self-worth, and, you know, she finally gets to have some really amazing sex, which had been lacking from the previous boyfriend. And then we have Athien, who actually is Tristan's boss, who comes and picks up his stuff that she's, you know, left on the curb, and they seem to have this instant attraction, and he's very gentlemanly and very much interested in her from the get-go. And then there's another guy named, cannot remember the other guy's name, but that is going to be a slower burn, I think, because he is dealing with a horrible ex. Horrible exes are the thing in this book. Drew has also a gold digger girlfriend. They're in an open relationship, but he throws her to the curb. The third guy has a horrible ex dealing with a custody battle, so his kid's the priority, but we'll be interested to see how he plays into their dynamic. And just was a really great change of pace. We do have some, obviously, dealing with some toxic relationships and standing up and setting boundaries for yourself. In speaking of toxic relationships, Zelda also stands up to her sister, who thinks she's going to come in, ignores everything Zelda says, and is going to make everything better and fix everything, despite the fact that Zelda says, no, I'm fine, life is actually quite good right now, and please leave me alone. She has this habit of just stepping over Zelda and making her do whatever the sister wants to do. So I enjoyed also seeing Zelda stand up for her in that regard. And yeah, at the end of the book, Athien's been attacked. We don't know who did it, and they're just trying to figure out their dynamic. So was a really fun time, lots of steam, dealt with some heavy topics, and really balanced, I think, as well. For a shortish book, it's under 300 pages, and would be very interested to continue on with the rest of the series. Also, I love these covers. I think they're iconic. And then I picked up, I was clearly having a why choose moment, because I picked up My Summer Girl by Maeve Black, which is another review copy that I received. So thank you for Faded Romance and Maeve Black for sending a copy my way. This is a standalone, but she seems to be doing a kind of collection of holiday monster romances. So this was the Midsummer edition. And we are following this beautiful queer poly dynamic, which was such a fun time. We are following Luce, who is a Cupid who is kind of burnt out. She's seen a couple of her siblings at this stage fall in love, but at this point Cupids are supposed to work every day not to fall in love. They have kind of like arranged marriages in order to further the Cupid line. She doesn't really know what she wants out of life except for what she's told she's supposed to be. So what is very unlike anybody, she ends up taking the summer off and going to explore. She creates what's called a fuck it list and is just basically going to do whatever she wants because fuck it, why not? And we have her with a couple of people. So first off, she has a relationship with Vex, who is a Seraphim, and he runs this sex club. And at this point in time, they have a non-sexual sub-dom dynamic, which start of this book, they venture into the sexual side. And then we have the Solaris Queen, who is hosting the Midsummer Festival for her people. Verona, I believe is her name, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And she is the newly crowned queen. This festival is supposed to bring out a pollination, which is a fertility rite, which they haven't had in, I believe, decades, if not a century. I can't remember the exact time frame. And her people need this so that they can continue to exist as a race. So she sends off her best friend a crooner, which is like this orc with like magical abilities named Reva. And he is this beautiful himbo, and he goes off to find Vex because originally Vex's club was supposed to be found a mate, and his queen is looking for a mate, and he is also very much in love with the queen but is willing to risk that for her happiness and potentially for the sake of their people, and ends up finding our Cupid, Duluth, and kidnaps her. And it's a bit slow to start as we kind of get to know everybody, and I really appreciated that we had the character's name at the top but also their pronouns, and it was just really good to keep track of who's who. The plot lines are really focused on Verona's concern about her people and the pollination not happening, and our Cupid Luce just not sure what she wants out of life. And then it is fantastic. All four characters are together, and it was interesting to see their dynamics and the way the relationships between each coupling plays out, because we have a mix of fast and slow and medium burn, which I really love, and that's really the focal point, is their relationships. I think there wasn't much outside plot, which is totally fine. The purpose of the book really for me was, and the thing I loved about it was the relationship and exploring their dynamics. And I also love that Maeve was able to weave in some of her Latin heritage, and so the Cupids use Spanish because it's the language of love, and very much high steam, low stakes, and beautiful representation of poly and queer relationship dynamics. Then I picked up The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. I didn't know that I needed a book in my life that had all the Pirates of the Caribbean vibes, but I did, and I'm so very glad I read this. So in this we are following Eric, who is the Ever King, and after a war between the Earth Kingdom, there is this magical barrier in the sea. The Ever King is one of the Sea Fae, which also, like sidebar, love the fact that we have Sea Fae and it's kind of bringing in these sirens and mermaids. Really, really love that. Yeah, so we have the Ever King. He is trying to break into the Earth Kingdom, and we have Livia, who is the princess of the Earth King. And she's kind of not really sure what to do with her life. The battle between the Sea Fae and the Earth King has dissipated in like the last 10 years. They're living their best life, and she kind of doesn't really know what to do. Her father mentions that she might have to be married soon, you know, being a princess, and she kind of not really sure what to do with that. So on a drunken night, she ends up diving into the sea and touching the magical barrier. And unbeknownst to her, there is a connection to Eric, who is the young boy, the blood singer, that she snuck into the prisons to read stories to. And the magical barrier starts to dissipate, and the Everking is hunting her down. And yeah, this was a fun time. I loved the pirate vibes. Eric kind of gives me Hook from Once Upon a Time and Wesley, but like Dread Pirate Roberts Wesley, in the fact that he says all these things like he's gonna hunt her down and careful if she does anything because he's gonna kill her and he's gonna kill her family, but when she's on their ship he never once hurts her or anything like that. And in fact, when they get together, he really is all for her and pulls a rice hand. If you've read Akamath, you get the vibes. And yeah, I love this. I also love watching Livia. She kind of thinks that she doesn't really have a very strong power, but there is this blight on the Ever, which is this kind of, they're under the ocean, but they have almost like a Viking-like town. So they're like Viking pirates. It's a fun time. It makes sense in the book. And Livia's power is able to cleanse that. And the ending, again, maybe I should just continue with series, because this book ended on a, again, cliffhanger. Didn't see what was happening, and really excited to end up reading the Everking. But yeah, if you like the idea of Fae but make them pirate Vikings, and also had a big crush on the Dread Pirate Roberts if you're a Princess Bride fan, I would pick up the Everking like right away. And the audiobook was a fun time. I actually listened to the entire audiobook during my last tattoo session and absolutely devoured it. It was so much fun. And then last but not least, I picked up Radiance by Grace Draven, which is the first book in the Wraith Kings series. And honestly, I cannot believe I have put this book off for so long. If you're looking for a low stakes friends to lovers fantasy romance, Radiance is for you. I can see now why everyone loves it. Whoever reads romance raves about it because it is so good. This book follows the arranged marriage of Ildiko, who is the niece of the Gowrie king, and Brishan, who is the spare heir to the Kai people, who are these kind of monster-like creatures with dark skin. They're nocturnal, and this marriage will be a peace deal between their people. And it's told in a dual perspective, and I love the fact that both Ildiko and Brishan at the start are very much like, my arranged person, they're not attractive to me. I'm not attractive to them at all. They have weird customs, they eat weird food, they look weird, but the marriage is going to be best for my people. So they both kind of had this attitude of, let's make the best out of a bad situation. And what is beautiful is that there's this friendship and this camaraderie that springs up between Ildiko and Brishan that slowly forms into an attraction and a romance, and it is just so sweet. This book really does focus on the pair of them, and Ildiko travels back to the Kai world and is learning their customs and getting familiar with her new home and her new people. It isn't really until the end that we get some like political machinations, and particularly the last chapter, I don't know what the hell Brishan's mother is doing. She's a piece of work, I tell you what. And I feel like the second book, which is called Aldean, is really going to be where the kind of political, really heavy fantasy plot brings in. But I think Radiance was just a beautiful exploration of this friends to lovers arranged marriage and introduction to this world. So yeah, I believe the hype, and I'm very excited to continue on with this series, but also to read more of Grace Draven's work. I really think she is an author who writes the right fantasy romance for me. So there you have it. That is the 15 books I read this month. Comment down below and let me know what your favorite book of June was, or you can leave me a dragon emoji for Fourth Wing. In the description box below, I will list all the books and any reviews if I have them. I will also leave links to my social media channels if you want to chat to me or follow me on any other corner of the internet. Anyway, that is all from me today, guys. I hope you're doing all kinds of well, and I will speak to you soon. See ya!